are flying a total of about 2,000 air sorties of all types each day.
Ramsey Clark, America's former Attorney General, visited Iraq during the war.
Well, welcome to Baghdad, Ramsey.
At night, he went out with the emergency services.
Their emergency crews that would go out when a bomb would fall, they'd get in these trucks and they'd have shovels, and they would have battery-powered flashlights, and they would have stretchers and things, and they'd go driving as quickly as they could to where the bomb had fallen, because you couldn't phone and ask for help. You'd have to try and go as quickly as you could or wait for word by car or foot to come tell you. And you'd see people injured there, people being brought out of there, and in the hospitals, of course, they were just full of people.
May I ask you?
This is a group from the English language department of Baghdad University.
I felt it was inhumane because they had moved the fighting from the battlefield, from the borders, off to the cities. They weren't just concerned with military people, but they were actually concerned with civilians, kids, children, women, elders. I mean, I can't believe how they didn't actually think about it. I don't think they thought about what they're doing, because if they had an ounce of humanity in them, I don't think they would have done that.
According to the International Commission, which visited Iraq in August 1991, Baghdad had one of the world's most modern sewage treatment plants. The man behind this modern system has a PhD degree from Britain and is the manager of Baghdad's waterworks, Dr. Ananded Jalbero.
The Allies did not hit directly any of our treatment plants, and they did not have to do so, because they stopped our treatment plants completely by destroying the only 3 sources of chlorine production in Iraq. And without chlorine, you cannot drink water without disinfection. They destroyed the only source of aluminum sulfate used for precipitation. They destroyed all electric power supply, and they destroyed fuel sources.
The Allies bombed every factory producing water-purifying chemicals. They also bombed a Pepsi Cola plant and a factory producing milk powder for babies. These factories were carpet-bombed by B-52s, and thousands of people living nearby were killed.
Poor, those were the most affected people, who are the majority. They went to the rivers, to ditches, to swamps, to anywhere they could find water, polluted water. And although we tried to notify people that this is dangerous and you have to boil water at least, but this was on personal contact, because we didn't even have a television or a radio to talk to people.
The sewers ruptured when the sludge could not be pumped. Sewage oozed out onto the streets. All over the country, children are finishing school, and the sewage lies in the streets. This is Saddam City, the poor area of Baghdad.
And everywhere we have a pipe broken. It means upstream this broken area, all the sewage cannot be discharged, Therefore, it went up into the streets and in some cases into the houses of people. After aggression, I could estimate maybe 40% of the inhabited areas of Baghdad were covered with sewage. Streets, parks.
The picture is the same in all the towns we visit. Sewage in the streets instead of in pipes underground. On the 17th of January, the Allies attack all of Iraq's major power stations. According to an international commission traveling in Iraq 6 months later, this is what the Allied Air Force did. The high-tension systems of power stations were short-circuited by means of special bombs which spewed out steel wires on impact. The power stations themselves were then systematically bombed. Before the Gulf War, the Al-Hatha power station supplied electricity to 1.4 million households in southern Iraq.
The first day of the war,
Yeah?
it was bombed on 11 o'clock. It was bombed 13 times. Yeah.
When did they bomb it the last time?
The last time of bombing is on the last day of the war, on 28th of February. It was bombed.
On the 17th of January, the American Air Force began to destroy by bombing all electricity production in Iraq. First, they attacked the largest power stations, Beji and Mosul Yarmouk in Kurdistan, in the north near the Turkish border, and 1,000 kilometers from Kuwait. Also Al-Dora in Baghdad, Musayyab and Al-Hatha in the south. On the following day, medium-sized and small power stations were bombed until only 5% of Iraq's energy production capacity remained.
People live in this building. There's 100 buildings like this in central Erbil.
That is Richard McDowell speaking. And this is a refugee center. We're about to go inside to witness conditions. Yes?
Have you looked up? A bunch of kids hanging over the end of the top that would like United States to get
Okay, we gotta go in.
Okay.
Okay, we gotta go in.
This is the only water supply for this building.
House. Yeah, but the situation in house was it is better from sanitation and water, but it is difficult because we don't have money to pay the money. Right, rent. Yeah, from rent, no. You like this one family living in this one family.
This is where one family lives in this refugee center. What you're hearing, of course, is their only source of heat. Going.
Flying in the third world towards the people stranded on their wing. Bombs falling over Baghdad, killing children who are starving by the green. There are those of us who question, what's the goal and what's the cost? 600,000 dead children, a UN-sanctioned holocaust. Missiles flying in the third world, from Hanoi to Wounded Knee. Bombs falling over Baghdad, each one shouts democracy. Conscious kings and generals, brand stars and stripes, from Rangoon to Los Angeles, selling oil guns and crack pipes. Missiles flying in the third world, each one will kill a child. Bombs falling over Baghdad, and hunger and death is running wild. We had to destroy the village in order to save it, to help the jungle grow. First we had to paint it.
This child is suffering from marasmus or malnutrition.
Nice program was having by our branch here.
What is this little child's name?
شو اسمه هذا؟ أفين بنية ولد بنية. أفين is a girl.
Avin,
Yeah,
a little girl. How old?
1.5 years.
1.5 years.
1.5 years, yes.
This is Zubeda. Zubeda. And how old is she? 1 year. Is it marasmus?
Yes, marasmus.
Malnutrition. Does she get glucose, IV?
Yes, IV.
Does the hospital have enough of the little needles for children?
Yes.
Bombs falling over Baghdad, and hunger and death is running wild. We had to destroy the village in order to save it, to help the jungle grow. First we had to paint it. Missiles flying in the third world, but fits and starts are everywhere. From the mountains of Chiapas to the streets of Central Square, empires fall, this one will too. So here's a song for the day when this one is through.
George was just there, is back within the last month or so. Please welcome him to share what he has seen in Iraq. George Kapachnik.
And I would like to tell you a little bit about what I've seen there, and I would also like to read a poem at the end of my presentation based upon, I wrote a series of poems and stories after my first trip to Iraq. A woman came up to me on Sunday after I gave a presentation, and she said, an elderly woman, very frail and very much afraid, and she said, if we bomb Iraq, does that mean that terrorists will start to bomb our own country? She was very afraid. Other people have said, well, you know, this country over there possesses the ability to destroy, create great destruction in the world. Isn't this the right thing to do? And I want to make it clear from the beginning that I separate the political from the humanitarian, that there are political entanglements that need to be worked out, but there is also suffering on a grand scale, a great humanitarian catastrophe. I would call it one of the greatest crimes of the 20th century. Certainly one of the worst atrocities since World War II. More children have died there than the number of people who died in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. More people have died in Iraq because of sanctions than people who died in the Bosnian crisis, the Bosnian War. Just to give you some idea of the magnitude of the suffering. 30% of the children under age 5 in Iraq are malnourished. Now, this is in a country which prior to sanctions had one of the best healthcare systems in the Middle East. Children and adults received healthcare throughout their lives, free healthcare, free education, the best hospitals in the Middle East. People came in with particular problems that were met by the hospitals in Iraq. The entire healthcare infrastructure has been destroyed by sanctions and by the bombing that took place in 1991. And we mustn't leave out that part of the story. What the United States and its allies did in 1991 is part of that story. Deliberate destruction of a country's infrastructure, its electrical power grids, its milk factories, its sewage systems, its water treatment plants, its hospitals, its roads, its bridges, its mosques, and its churches. All these were deliberately targeted. The collateral damage that we are speaking of are run perhaps up to 200,000 people, innocent people who were killed. That was not a war, that was a massacre, it was a slaughter done to a relatively, and I say relatively, defenseless country. And now we're supposed to believe that this country poses a threat to the entire cosmos, that only the United States and its ally Britain can possibly cope with by inflicting yet more damage, more carnage. So I'm calling my presentation Iraq, compassion, not carnage.
You want to talk about weapons of mass destruction, then go to Iraq, and you'll see one in effect. It's called sanctions, and you know it killed 1 million people. And there are some first folks out here who are concerned about weapons of mass destruction, and I understand that fear. But 1 million people have already died. And most of them have been little children. Where is the compassion in Albright, in Clinton, in Hussein, in Richard Butler, in Bill Richardson? They know the statistics. They've seen the UN reports. They want to blame the government of Iraq. It's sanctions that are causing the deaths of these people. 1 million people.
What is happening today is incomprehensible to me. Biological weapons, talking about mass destruction, you have the institution of the CIA they know very well. And they have the list of who has biological and chemical weapons in the world. You want to be the police of the area. You want to protect the world. Go and get everyone. But since when? Since when the United States goes, kills children and women? Because of what? To implement the United Nations resolution. Oh my God. We should, as Arabs, make a big lawsuit against the United Nations and the United States, because they could have avoided us a lot of wars if they had pushed Israel to comply with the United Nations resolution. Although it hurt me a lot at the time, what he did to my father, but this has nothing to do with what I am today. I'm a mother like God said in the chapter of creation about human beings. We created thee to mercy each other. Who's the merciful? It's Him. The merciful. He put it in us as human beings for each other. I'm very, very glad that I met the most noble human beings that God has created. All of you here tonight. No war on Iraq and no more of the genocide of the Iraqi children. They are our children and we have to preserve them. They are the children of the world. And I thank you very, very much for allowing me this chance. God bless you all. Thank you very much.
And it's clear that there are many issues that people of goodwill, intelligent people, disagree on. But as was said much more eloquently earlier, this is not an issue of Middle East politics. This is an issue of morality and humanity. And precisely because I am a Jew, I have no option but to stand here and speak out. My concerns, and I have concerns, but only secondarily, about strategy or tactics. Again, let me say that, and make it clear, that I believe that Saddam Hussein is an evil man. I think the people of Iraq would be better off with different leadership and with a better kind of government. But I have heard no argument that convinces me that we have a right to make those things that way, to make them happen, or that any plan put forth so far could accomplish that goal, even if we had the right to do it. And let me say that I am not casual about the threat of the weapons that Saddam Hussein probably has, nor am I unaware of the arguments of what Saddam Hussein could do if he stopped building palaces and tried to help his own people. But again, that's not the issue for us and for our government. Where are we standing now with the prospect of a military action that will kill an unknown number of people beyond the people that were killed in the last war and the people that are being killed every day, every month because of our policy. And I would like to say that I think that it is incumbent upon any of us and all of us who view the world from a faith perspective that we must stand up and raise our voices when the lives of our fellow human beings, the lives of children, are at risk. Probably the two highest values in Jewish tradition are human life and the concept of shalom, which we generally translate as peace, but we don't understand it. It's not peace as in the absence of war. It comes from a root, shalem, which means wholeness and completeness. And the mystics said that the place that we're aiming for is a place of wholeness and completeness, the bringing back of all the shattered parts of the universe in a wholeness, a fullness. And they said that every single person makes up part of that fullness. So we can do nothing else if we are conscious people of faith, but stand up and say, we cannot, all the other political, strategic, tactical things notwithstanding, we cannot stand up and support policies and actions that kill human beings.
My friends, as we gather this evening, hanging in thinking about Ram and his kids, about Iraqi parents and their kids. We don't need to think much further than that, do we? To decide to give everything we have to peace. To peace. Thank you for being here.
Flying in the third world, towards the people stranded on their knee. Bombs falling over Baghdad, killing children who are starving by the green. There are those of us who question, what's the goal and what's the cost? 600,000 dead children, a UN-sanctioned Holocaust. Missiles flying in the third world, from Hanoi to Wounded Knee. Bombs falling over Baghdad, each one shouts democracy. Conscious kings and generals, brandish stars and stripes. From Rangoon to Los Angeles, selling oil guns and crack pipes. Missiles flying in the third world, each one will kill a child. Bombs falling over Baghdad, and hunger and death is running wild. We had to destroy the village in order to save it, to help the jungle grow. First we had to pave it. Missiles flying in the third world, but fits and starts are everywhere. From the mountains of Chiapas to the streets of Central Square. Empires fall, this one will too. So here's a song for the day when this one is through.
They are the children of the world. And I thank you very, very much for allowing me this chance. God bless you all. Thank you very much.
I will tell you something. It makes it an act of courage, I believe, for Jews in this country to stand up publicly, visibly, and say, not in our name, not bomb Iraq. Because there's a lot of pressure for that not to happen. So this is by way of introducing our last person who will say a few public words, and then there's an opportunity for those of you who may want to say a few things. I want you to welcome the person who was a former director of Temple Beth Shalom of Cambridge, now educational director with B'nai B'rith of Somerville. Please welcome Marty Fetterman.
I feel something a little bit like an appendix. I know I'm here, but I'm not sure that I serve a purpose after some of the people that you've heard before me. And it's clear that there are many issues that people of goodwill intelligent people disagree on. But as was said much more eloquently earlier, this is not an issue of Middle East politics. This is an issue of morality and humanity. And precisely because I am a Jew, I have no option but to stand here and speak out. My concerns, and I have concerns, but only secondarily, about strategy or tactics. Again, let me say that, and make it clear, that I believe that Saddam Hussein is an evil man. I think the people of Iraq would be better off with different leadership and with a better kind of government. But I have heard no argument that convinces me that we have a right to make those things that way, to make them happen, or that any plan put forth so far could accomplish that goal, even if we had the right to do it. And let me say that I am not casual about the threat of the weapons that Saddam Hussein probably has, nor am I unaware of the arguments of what Saddam Hussein could do if he stopped building palaces and tried to help his own people. But again, that's not the issue for us and for our government. Where are we standing now with the prospect of a military action that will kill an unknown number of people beyond the people that were killed in the last war and the people that are being killed every day, every month because of our policy. And I would like to say that I think that it is incumbent upon any of us and all of us who view the world from a faith perspective that we must stand up and raise our voices when the lives of our fellow human beings, the lives of children, are at risk. Probably the two highest values in Jewish tradition are human life and the concept of shalom, which we generally translate as peace, but we don't understand it. It's not peace as in the absence of war. It comes from a root, shalem, which means wholeness and completeness. And the mystics said that the place that we're aiming for is a place of wholeness and completeness, the bringing back of all the shattered parts of the universe in a wholeness, a fullness. And they said that every single person makes up part of that fullness. So we can do nothing else if we are conscious people of faith, but stand up and say, we cannot, all the other political, strategic, tactical things notwithstanding, we cannot stand up and support policies and actions that kill human beings.
My friends, as we gather this evening, hanging in the balance and leaning toward war, I'm thinking about Rob and his kids, about Iraqi parents and their kids. We don't need to think much further than that, do we? To decide to give everything we have to peace. To peace. Thank you for being here.
Flying in the third world, towards the people stranded on their knees. Bombs falling over Baghdad, killing children who are starving by degrees. There are those of us who question, what's the goal and what's the cost? 600,000 dead children, a UN-sanctioned Holocaust. Missiles flying third world, from Hanoi to Wounded Knee. Bombs falling over Baghdad, each one shouts democracy. Conscious kings and generals, brandished stars and stripes, from Rangoon to Los Angeles, selling oil guns and crack pipes. Missiles flying in the third world, each one will kill a child. Bombs falling over Baghdad, and hunger and death is running wild. We had to destroy the village in order to save it, to help the jungle grow. First we had to pave it. Missiles flying in the third world, but fits and starts are everywhere. From the mountains of Chiapas to the streets of Central Square. Empires fall, this one will too. So here's a song for the day when this one is through. Any place because your mind's open, the rest is up to you. You can dream out any dream.
Good evening. Welcome to Insights. This monthly production is relative to the video you just saw on bombing, precisely bombing, past bombing on Iraq and anticipated bombing on Iraq. You've heard from other sources their opinions on this issue. Very much in the media, you've heard from the War Department, the Defense Department. They changed the name of that. You've also heard that was Albright and Cummings and others.
And Bill Cohen.
Bill Cohen.
Yeah.
And you heard from the mainstream media, which is corporate media, which are like NBC, ABC, CBS, which are your main defense contractors or that finance their operation or stockholders. Now you're hearing from a third alternative, from the people from opposition, which Connor Foley here today with me. Both of us are members of Veterans for Peace, and we're members of Green Party, which are in oppositions with many, many grassroots organizations who have participated in demonstrations against this bombing, which you saw in the video, even though you don't see on main media. We're going to do a little brief history and try to give you an objective viewpoint like we did for the schools. I think I helped out a lot in those productions to give the Winthrop residents both sides of the issue. Is an informed public, is an educated public.
Yes, I would like to just mention the brief historical, recent history of the Iraq problem. And we know that during the Iran war and after, that the European nations, Germany, France, England, the US, Russians, were all giving and selling high-tech and biotech weaponry to Saddam. He was learning the ropes, and he learned it because he had the money to buy all this very expensive knowledge, if you will, from the Europeans, Americans, and Russians, and possibly the Chinese. And we're reaping what we sow. And again, this gets right into the U.S. as a #1 merchant of death, if you will, weaponry for war, whether it's landmines or high-tech fighter planes.
So you're saying that we sold chemical weapons to Iraq?
We sold,
to
well,
Hussein?
I can't break it down which country sold what, but he got all this technology, a lot of it. He may have had some of his own already, but he got a good head start in getting what he wanted, and suddenly he's starting using these things. And what do you expect? I mean, the guy's a nut. I guess maybe we all agree on that.
Well, I'm never would join the Hussein fan club. I'm sorry, can't get my membership. But I have to say, wait a minute. He is not allowing, the inspections, but he's losing 4,000 children a day by sanctions. And, that maybe now when he allows the inspections, that the sanction be lifted and the oil can be sold, because I believe, Anna, that was the first day that he spent talking about that, to take care of, and so we don't lose 4,000, dead children every day because of sanctions.
Well, again, he is, in the case of threatening to bomb them, we're threatening again to use the devastation of the civilian social fabric as a weapon against his craziness.
Oh, yeah, I know.
There's got to be a moral line there. Something we just can't, I mean, this has happened before in history. It's not the first time. You know, we did the same thing against the Indians or whoever we wanted to exploit.
Yeah, no,
this is an old game that's been played out before.
It sort of shocked me was when I heard that, I heard Bill Clinton saying something like, well, I'm going to teach Hussein a lesson. I'm going to bomb, throw I don't know how many bombs, and they gave the reports right away saying there'd be like 1,700 civilian casualties a day. There you go, Hussein, I just killed about 10,000 of your people. Their blood's all in the street. How do you like that? I mean, whoa, is this our policy in the future for when we have disagreements with countries in the situation? And the guys that are our good guys now could be our bad guys next week. Like Hussein was our good guy. He was our buddy. Sure. In fact, we didn't say anything when he was our buddy, when he used the chemical weapons against his own people. We didn't say anything about it. It's okay, Hussein, no problem, because you're our buddy. So is this going to be the policy for the future?
Yeah, that's the... And again, we're looking at Iraq, but there are other nations, no doubt, that have, like ourselves, that have biological weapons. We have them stored. We have redundant nuclear capability way beyond any global needs. The Russians still have missiles pointed at us. Who knows what Israel's doing with their weaponry in terms of UN sanctions and all that. So there are many people out there that are winking at the UN and saying, yeah, right, let's go get Saddam.
Well, this is what was said in the video that George said. Well, wait a minute, you want to talk about weapons of mass destruction? The sanctions have been well documented by the UN, have been responsible for the deaths of over 1 million people. That's a mass destruction, over 1 million people dead. Now, they're dead, right? Whereas we're saying, well, hypothetically, we're going to say he might use these weapons. I mean, I don't know if he is or not, but that's hypothetical that he would kill 1 million. We've already killed him with a weapon of mass destruction.
Yeah, if the rules of this kind of engagement apply, it should have applied prior to the Vietnam War. If people knew that we were going to napalm that country and bomb the living daylights out of it, for whatever reason, economic, political reasons, somebody should have bombed our country. I mean, you get into a crazy scenario.
You understand? There's still
second guessing.
There's still some people out there felt we really could have saved Vietnam from communism if we had bombed every single Vietnamese. We had killed every single Vietnamese, they would have been saved from communism. But also, the situation when we look, as you say, what's good for the goose is good for the gander, in East Timor, in Indonesia. Here we're supporting, I mean, how many people do they give you in the media that Indonesia, which we supported with our arms, invaded East Timor, has killed massacred hundreds of thousands of people just the last few years, and it's still killing them. Is it on the media? Are people concerned about this atrocity that's going on? I mean, without any justification.
I think if Saddam wants to be an empire builder, he should sit down with the CIA and learn how to get into low intensity, less, covert, low profile, low intensity, and not be so blatant about his ambitions. Then we've succeeded in going that route. The U.S. Well, south of the border, we have plantations below there. They call them nations, but they're plantations.
Was he a School of the Americas dropout?
Could have been,
yeah. He didn't get the CIA's lesson.
But we're even recently now. Last year we trained 3,000 Mexican nationals, special forces at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Now we have Fort Bragg and Fort Benning as School of the Americas training their people, their soldiers, to go down and beat up on their own people, denying them constitutional rights to land. But that's because Saddam is on a different track. Well, but still, it's.
I feel like in a situation that would improve everybody's relationships, such as my talking about Cuba. If you lift the embargo, lift the trade, whatever, the Americans and the money go down there, and those kids are already wearing the torn dungarees and the hats backwards and all that. There'd be so much, there'd be the next state before you know it in a way. And also in Iraq, you lift the sanction, what have you, let them build back up. Then right now it's bombed into the last century or so. It's like it's a totally third world condition. So they've got nothing to lose. Now, if you let them build the country up, they might be a little more cautious, and they might be a little bit more restrictive on who their leadership is. When somebody's got you got a nice house, you want to protect it. If you're living in a bombed out, thing without electricity, whatever, so these things should be looked at.
Yeah, I think. Well, again, the film highlights the side effects just don't warrant the innocents that are suffering doesn't warrant this kind of action. And hopefully this, you know, we're the #1 militarily, and hopefully this thing settles itself with this possible treaty. But again, they're taking pot shots at it already from the left, from the Republicans and Democrats themselves. But again, we're reaping what we sowed, and we just can't. You live by the sword. Not only does that mean swinging the sword, but it also means selling the sword, and we're selling the sword. And who knows what friend is an enemy tomorrow?
Yes, that's true. We're like the #1 export of weapons in the world, and it gives a lot of jobs to a lot of people. And as you said, the Democrat, Republican legislators are they're sort of beholden to the constituents. You know, people like who work at Raytheon, who are going to be getting, you know, better pay, and there'll be more jobs opening up and selling these different missile things or so around the world. There's a lot of constituency there when you have such an export of these weapons. Unfortunately, the final results of these I think, is hardly worth, you know, the profits. But the congressmen have told me up in Washington, they say, you know, if I turn against my constituents, I'm out of office. So there's a good point there.
Yeah, pursuing that sowing and reaping and sowing, whatever. During the 30s, we sold tons and tons of scrap metal to the Japanese. And we knew the Japanese weren't building Tinker Toys. We knew what they were doing with it. And suddenly, surprise, surprise, they attacked Pearl Harbor. Again, our friends suddenly say, hey, we're not so friendly after all. But this is a condition of human weakness, and we have strengths and weaknesses, but we get into this money thing, and money corrupts everything.
Oh yeah, the money situation, exactly, like down in Gingrich country where they're making the fighter planes. I mean, they had the F-16, the best fighter plane in the world, right? They sold it all over the world for big profits and what have you. Now, they're saying, oh, these people who once were our friends are now our enemies, and they have F-16s, we have to build a better plane. So now they're building, I believe it's the F-22, which is at the cost of $80 billion to the taxpayers. And I'm sure they already got in the plans to sell that so they can, you know, and so these people are making money. But, I mean, look at like today, I mean, it was quite shocking. I'm not really surprised, though, that our youth of America are among the least educated. We're way down the line of education in the world. You know, you see that in the paper today?
Yeah, yeah.
And I've been hearing other reports about that for some time now. But they're making more clear that math and science, I mean, this is where we should be pouring our tax dollars into. Such as, you know, we accepted a vote for the schools. You know, it doesn't guarantee the best student. I'm hoping they're going to show us a better product. But that's, I think, in the right direction. And the same thing, this country is getting in the right direction for education, not arms sales.
I think part of that IQ business is...
that wasn't IQ, those are standardized tests.
Standardized intelligence, okay. Well, this is, I think it's part of, we eat too much processed food.
Yeah.
We're becoming a very bland,
you didn't see the article today, then?
I just read this quickly. I didn't read the whole thing. I just skimmed through. But you have a poem to read, I think. You want to read that?
Well... Yeah, it was in the paper today too. I mean, I don't know why I buy that scandal sheet, but you know, it keeps me entertained. I guess in some ways I have a lot of laughs. You know, it's like reading the New York Times or so. You know, yeah, this was in there today. It really moved me because it's very related to what's happening and also to our organization, Veterans for Peace, which when you join, your statement of purpose is to abolish war. It's archaic. You know, the famous saying, "We found the enemy." And it's us. Yeah, this was done by Maria Pita. Am I saying that correctly?
Maria Pita, yeah.
Right. And it's basically a peace plead. And I think it's very appropriate. Not for long can we restrain the beast of hate with bombings rain that brings a flood of death and pain and feeds a flame of growing rage. So much blood is on our hands. Let's spill no more on desert sand, but give to peace a greater chance till war from earth at last is banned. Thank you. You've been watching Insights, and we hope we gave a little better insight on the situation. Thank you and good night.
Thank you.